Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is for Real Estate is a Scam update. Sometimes something comes up, something happens, either in the law, the legislators, they have some sort of idea. Sometimes it's in the courts. Sometimes it's somebody getting hosed, and we want to get to the bottom of it. And I think that if you like to watch these sorts of videos, you actually appreciate a little bit of nuance, understanding that simplicity is usually hiding a lot of what's going on. And today I'm joined with Z. How you doing today, Z?
Great, Dan. Great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So before we get too excited, let's talk about your background, so everybody in the audience knows why you're an authority on this sort of thing. And I guess we need to say it's like you may be an attorney, but you're not your attorney, and anything we say is just like nonsense, and you shouldn't trust it or something like that. Do you have a go ahead and introduce yourself and any other disclaimers that you feel are important? Go for it.
Okay, so in this context, my experience with real estate goes back 4 years. I started in 1031 space doing 1031 exchanges. That was pretty exciting, and the market was really hot then. We were doing about 25 exchanges a day, which we were holding lots of money in the bank. And I moved over to the LLC space when there was an opportunity to start a new division. We started doing the LLC, and LLCs were sort of ho-hum. I was wondering what's going to be with it, but as I got more deeply involved in it, it actually is a pretty exciting space. It's just a space that nobody's really interested in. So part of the challenge is to get people interested and make people understand that this is a very important part of their business. Not necessarily that they got to think about all day or more than even once, but you do got to think about it once, make sure it's set, and then just play by the rules. The government actually made it really exciting last week. They had a law that was passed in 2021, only implemented in 2024. But it didn't take long for an Alabama court to decide that it was unconstitutional. So for a week, everybody was pretty excited, but the government just came out and said, we don't care. We'll be enforcing it anyway, except exactly for the plaintiffs who the court enjoined us from enforcing it against. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely brutal. And so, just some background, like there are a few people in my network who are Canadian, and they don't have LLCs in Canada. So, LLC stands for Limited Liability Corporation, and corporations often get a bad name, especially in left-leaning media, because they're like, oh, well, that's the source of all evils and all corruption and all that kind of stuff. And there is some background to know about that. Like, honestly, when people are slinging these insults at corporations, I find they tend to be the publicly traded corporations that are actually the brunt, the ones that are deserving of some sort of criticism in these cases. But the whole idea of an LLC is that if you go ahead and invest in something and you don't create an LLC, people can actually sue you when you make a mistake and go after all of your own personal possessions. And so that is enough to make a lot of people say, hey, why would I ever do that? There's a famous court case that people ought to know about from New York City, which is where somebody built an LLC for the minimum amount of taxi cabs as they possibly could, and then when one of them ended up hitting somebody and they had the absolute minimum amount of insurance, they decided that, well, we need to find out whether or not that is actually responsible and okay. And so like that's something about corporations that I think it's fairly deserving of a bad name, but that's the whole idea, is to protect your assets at the end of the day. But when it comes to corporate transparency, the Corporate Transparency Act, it really means that in the past there were ways to hide that you owned a corporation, or if somebody wanted to sue a corporation, then they wouldn't be able to easily find out who the owner was. But I'm not the attorney here. Z, can you fill in the blanks there, or make
Sure.
any corrections?
Yeah. LLCs are controlled by state law, which means you got 50 states all vying for the LLC business. So because you have to have an LLC in the state where you're working, New York doesn't have to give any breaks. California doesn't have to give any breaks because there are going to be a lot of LLCs there just by virtue of the fact that there's a lot of business over there. But then you got states like Wyoming and Nevada who want a piece of the action, and they want you to file your LLCs over there. So what they do is they allow you to be anonymous. They charge no state tax. And that means that there are ways to structure LLCs and layers with holding companies that even a New York LLC can get anonymity if it has a parent company in Wyoming. So they're in the game now, and that's great. And because of that, unfortunately, there's a lot of money laundering, there's a lot of terrorist money flowing through, drug money. All this is by setting up these shell companies just to hide the money trail. And the federal government basically said, I'm glad you guys are happy with this arrangement, but we're not. And we need to know what's going on in these LLCs. So it's pretty valid. And they set up something called the Corporate Transparency Act, where corporations need to be transparent. So what they're saying is, it's true, there's a state database, and that's public information. We're not going to make any of your information public, but we want to know all your information. And it's the depth and the breadth of the information the Corporate Transparency Act wants to know is far more than any state government wants to know about your LLCs. But they say, we'll lock it up in a database and nobody's going to know about it. It's just for law enforcement. So 99.99% of you good people out there just running your business, you have nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, the Alabama court found that they still have overreach because it's not constitutional for them to impose this on LLC owners. And last week, they ruled that it's unconstitutional. Now, the suit was brought by the National Small Business Association, and the government's response, which everybody was waiting for a couple of days, was, we disagree with the court case, but it's the law. And what we'll do is we will not enforce it against those 60,000 plus NSBA member companies. But the rest of the 32 million companies out there will have to comply with the law. And that includes Alabama, where the court already said it's unconstitutional. But because they didn't actually enjoin them from enforcing it against them, they technically could. But we know what the results will be when they go back to court. It just gives you a window into the mind of the federal government, where they're saying this is so totally invalid, we won't recognize anything beyond the narrow scope and the letter of the law that the court order gave to us.
Mm-hmm. And so the constitutionality, is that under illegal search and seizure of papers? Is that how it's unconstitutional, or was there something else?
That's the beauty of it. The defense said, the plaintiff said that it violates First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment. The court didn't even have to get there. They found it unconstitutional just by the nature of what they're asking for. Not that it violated anybody's Bill of Rights. It simply was not within the power of the government to do this. Now, if some court does decide that it's within the power of the government to do this, they would still have to explain why it doesn't violate the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments.
Hmm.
So they got creamed.
Yeah, yeah, wow. It really says a lot about it. So as far as so people have a really short timeline to satisfy these requirements, even though in theory it's probably going to be just thrown out again if these court cases actually go through. So when you are throwing your hat into the ring to help people out with this compliance of the Corporate Transparency Act, what sort of thing are they looking at? Like, is it going to be where like an ongoing, like every year you need to be paying for some sort of professional services? Does it seem like something that's a little bit more one and done, or where exactly do you fit in for helping people out on that?
So officially, it's one and done. You have to file it once, and you never have to file again. The only problem is that if there's a change, you need to update it, which there are often changes. That's one of the advantages of working with a company like ours, because one of the pieces of information, for example, two of the pieces, your date of birth will never change. We're done with that. I mean, people change the date of birth, or at least the year of birth, on a regular basis, but it doesn't change.
Mhm.
You have your place of residence, primary residence. So, somebody asked me, says, wow, gee, I got 150 LLCs. And when I move, I'll build myself a new house. I'll get the contractor. After 3 years, we'll get it done. I'll call the moving trucks. We'll be on the way over. And on the way, I'm supposed to say, oh, shoot, I got to change all my CTA, all my BOIs, my beneficial ownership information for my 150 LLCs. And the answer to that is, that's true. You do. There are ways to make it easier. You can get an ID, and then you just put your ID in every LLC. So then you just got to change the ID. But you do have to continue to update it. Or if the ownership structure of the business changes, or one of the decision makers, somebody's out, somebody's in, you got to update the LLC. You have to update the BOI. It's just like you have to put in a driver's license, okay? Your driver's license doesn't last forever, right? It expires in 10 years from now, and you're not even really using this company anymore. You're supposed to remember, gee, I got my driver's license on the BOI, time to change my BOI. So, that's where we come in. We have a database. Everything's there for you. We update you We let you know, we check with you and make sure everything's in order. So you can really file it with us once and put it to bed and not worry what's going to happen in the future. That's what companies like ours are there for.
All right. So I'm sure people have to be wondering how to reach out. I'm going to sandbag it by talking about myself because that's what I do. I've got this super duper unique, it's not so much unique as distinctive last name. It makes me easy to find, especially on LinkedIn. And of course, you can also check out Amazon.com. You can check out realestateisascam.com to find all the different free education that I have available to anybody who wants to get into real estate and wants to know, hey, what are some of the things where smart, attentive people could absolutely lose their shirt on. And instead of trying to, sweep it under the rug and pretend that those skeletons aren't sitting there in that closet, I'm really mixing my metaphors by this point. I figured, why not make videos about them and include exactly what full timers do to make sure they don't lose their shirt for those exact reasons. So that's what I'm up to. But if people want to reach out to you, Z, like, I know that LinkedIn is a great place, but if you want to mention any other websites or anything like that, please feel free.
Sure, you can go to riversidefilings.com. You can contact me at my email address. That would be T as in Tom, Weiser at rsfilings.com. You can call me 732-769-3999. However you want to reach me, I'm there for you.
Excellent, excellent. And I really appreciate you joining me today. And I just want to say to everybody else in the audience, don't forget that if you want to help me in my plight to get YouTube to start paying for these videos instead of myself, then please do hit that subscribe button. And there's also there's a thumbs up button. There's also a little bell and stuff like that. I just really want these guys to start paying me. So you can just go ahead and ignore all those suggestions that you get of my videos on your timeline or whatever. It's just a matter of making this happen and getting the word out. So thanks again, Z. This has been really awesome getting to know you a little bit better.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks.